Hey guys, it's us again. It's Monday, and therefore it means that it is movie review day. And today we have a special guest. We have Carl R. Moore, who has a werewolf book out.
In case you missed the last one, here it is.
In case they missed the last one, yep. Which is super rad. I kind of gather it involves hunting season and all of that jazz. And we are reviewing The Hunt today, which very apropos.
I just love the word apropos. It's fun to say. It's almost as fun to say as triskaidekaphobia.
I can't say that.
I can't say that either.
Triskaidekaphobia is one of my favorite words to say. It just feels good on the tongue. It's the fear of the number 13, for those who didn't know. But it's
I
the fear
didn't
of the
know
number
that,
13.
yeah.
Triska, like cool. Tri, there's 3, deca, like 10, and then phobia means fear. So the fear of 3 plus 10 is the triskaidekaphobia.
Wow, man.
It's just fun to say.
Yeah.
We could go on as far as our favorite words in language. However, I would like to go into our rating system. So we have 4 categories that we hit. There's production, there's writing, there's characterization, and there's theme. And within those 4 categories, there are 3 subcategories that are used just to kind of like get the conversation started. So let's start with production. Let's see. Emma Roberts is in it from
Scream 4.
American Horror Story, as well as Scream 4, apparently.
She played Jill.
And Hilary Swank and Betty Gilpin.
I love Betty Gilpin.
Betty Gilpin kicks a lot of ass in this movie.
Wasn't Hilary Swank in $1 Million Baby?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, just and then there was a Peacock show called Mrs. Ooh, I just lost it. Mrs. something. Mrs. Davis. That's what it was called.
Mrs. Davis.
And if you watch Mrs. Davis and watch $1 Million Baby, like just imagine how this movie closes out. Like it's fantastic.
Yeah.
We'll get to that.
Yeah, we'll get to that. So within production, we have art direction. I think they have brilliant camera work. Each shot, each death that wasn't off screen, I thought was they had very interesting shots set up to capture the death. So also great graphics and makeup and stuff like that, especially for Dead Sexy, I think is the name of the character.
Oh, the girl with the spikes?
Mm-hmm, the girl with the spikes. I think she was very expertly made up. I saw a thing where she was mentioning that it weighed as much as like a pregnancy belly.
Wow.
Like a pregnancy suit.
They did the fact that they used practical effects, because the whole subcategory,
practical effects, yeah,
art direction, makeup, props, and camera and cinematography, and like that. The fact that they're still going to use some digital effects, like with the blood splatter in that first kill. Emma Roberts gets it like almost right away, and that blood splatter, digital effects. The gore in the spike pit, practical effects, and the good blending of both along with the color grading, the camera angles, especially as we're dealing with the Hilary Swank character. First in the beginning of the movie, and then at the toward the midway point where she's actually revealed. I loved how we kind of know it's Hilary Swank, but we don't know it's Hilary Swank. We're kind of looking for Hilary Swank, and they hide Hilary Swank in plain sight.
I know. I was waiting for her all movie long, and then in the third act, they finally.
Carl, what are your thoughts on the colorization between like the opening scene on the plane versus the wide open field that we go to almost next?
Well, the wide open field is really the plane's almost a prologue. The wide open field's really the inciting incident, and where you first get those handful of effects: the ballistics, the landmine, the legs going flying, the spike pit, all that, like you were saying. But that's really the that's when that's the beginning. That's Act 1. You know, like is opening the crate and the first people getting taken out. And then you begin, one of the coolest things going on here is that you begin like the long string of great quotable lines in this movie. Like, you know, so like, you know, you get your special effects buffet there with the crate and the first people getting blown away. And then it starts to settle into its rhythm, and you get your first, you know, great like kind of like kitschy horror movie lines, like, what is this, Avatar? He gets shot by the arrow. You know?
Yeah, what is this Avatar shit? Yeah, because Athena is the best with the, not Athena, but the Liberty. Liberty was good with the bow.
Right.
So one of the things that I found interesting, like around the time I first watched this movie, I had just watched for the first time The Hunger Games.
Right.
So there's a lot of parallels between like this open field and the opening to like the actual game of The Hunger Games. Because it's all these people kind of like set up, and then there's these weapons in the middle, and you kind of go for them, and then it's kind of like this weird free for all. I mean, but they're not going after each other. But they have no idea what's going on. Like they're clueless.
Battle royale sort of deal, yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like a, you know, it's a trope of the convention for this kind of, you know, there's almost an illusion, like, you know, for this subgenre of the like, you know, Lethal Olympics.
Yeah.
I give it a star for brilliant camera work, for great graphics, for great deaths until they started killing people off screen. I give it a star.
I would absolutely agree. Well, I love this movie, so this is going to get a lot of positive praise, a lot more praise than Mousetrap did. So basically, for Carl's sake, and for anyone this is their first episode of watching, we're going to explore those three elements in our subplot and decide whether or not the movie gets a star for this category. So looking at the art direction, the makeup, and the props, and the cinematography, I'm sorry, Pit Girl by herself wins the star for this movie. For the art direction, I love the color. There's so much color. Like when the movie starts, it starts off on that plane. And there's so much color with that blue. They're traveling on a plane at night, so there's no light coming through the windows, and you got all this like just these reds from like your signal lights, and your blue from like the walls, and it's just a beautiful scene. And then it shifts into the field. You got another set where they have built this mom and pop gas station. Eventually, you get to the manor and
the
house itself,
right?
And then you go into like there's like the office, and the attention that they spent on the scenes, and because that's actually I think the Blumhouse production, I believe, and that's actually Jason Blum's office.
Yeah,
like the office scene where we reveal Hilary Swank. That's Jason Blum's office, his actual office.
That's killer. I had no idea.
And it's a great set with the open windows. It really does set the tone. I love when you're able to really understand the characters by looking around the character before the character says a word. And
Yeah, man.
you understand the position of these people. And Athena, I think it's Hilary Swank plays Athena.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And her office really just highlights what this character represents. This rich, this philanthropist, this person with a lot of money, high status, and
1%.
yeah, and you if you had this movie on mute and just started right then and there, you understand this character by just looking at the glass corner office and such. And it's even funnier that it's an actual person's office who's involved in the movie. Kind of says a lot, but absolutely gets a star for this opening section.
What do you think?
I feel like I get that from the kitchen too, although that's not till the end. But the stuff she's got laid around in the kitchen, you're like, oh, okay, this is definitely like the high end kitchen. I don't even know what you call that little blowtorch thing, like, but
it's a blowtorch.
It's blowtorch. Yeah,
it was a blowtorch. Okay, yeah.
It's used in culinary when you make like creme brulee.
Okay, there you are. Right,
or baked Alaska, and you burn it.
Baked Alaska, yeah.
Right. Lessons in Gruyere cheese and so forth for the like all that was definitely the setting making the character. But
they made that house for that fight.
Yeah, they built that house.
They built it on a set, and
there's a really excellent publicly available behind the scenes about that scene by itself, and to see how they built it specifically for the fight scene as choreographed by their stunt people. It's a fascinating watch. You can go on, we're on YouTube, so you're already on YouTube. So people who are watching, when you're done watching this video and going back to see the interview that we just did with Carl R. Moore about his book Red December, then you can go do a search about that scene. So watch our stuff first.
Insider, it was Fair. There's a bunch of interviews about it.
And a lot of those interviews are going to have to deal with the stuff that goes on in our second category, which has to do with writing. And this is where we're going to discuss the dialogue, the plot, and the overall pacing. Yes, I have notes. Carl, you're a writer. I'm a writer. She's a writer. How did you feel about the writing of this movie, like the way it was written?
I thought it was killer, man. I would say that, like, it's the thing that I'm always emphasizing. Like, it's the context that makes it. Like, for me, it was like revealing itself to be so obviously kitschy and making fun of itself, even as it reveals its own story, kind of saves it for me. If it had been serious in its more serious in its symbolism, it would have been harder to draw me in. But it was, its sense of humor kept was like just really, really brought all the flavor, so I would say the writing is killer. And even though they were being like highly symbolic and they had plots within plots within plots, and you kind of like, there was almost like a mystery there was a mystery in determining, whether the conspiracy was real and this sort of thing. And they layered it in a way that was not predictable. I thought it was not predictable. Maybe you guys saw it coming, but it was on my second watch that I really, without spoiling it for myself by reading all the articles, that it came through what was going on with the internet conspiracy theory and the authenticity of the game and so forth. So that was killer. But because of its cool jokes and so forth, it didn't come out as, hey, we're trying to be super clever, but it was super clever. So I thought the writing was killer. It identified what kind of, I would call it like, it was like, if Hunger Games was subgenre dystopian fiction, I would call this like art slash or something. It was like slasher with this art movie feel.
So this is the part where we get to actually talk about what the movie is about. I wait for the writing part. Otherwise you jump category. So the basic premise of this movie is that a bunch of people, they are, listen, now I'm going to say this, and this has nothing to do with nothing. This is just the plot of the movie. Don't get mad at us. We didn't write it. It's a group of conservatives that were kidnapped, and they were put out to play a game called The Hunt. Is Manorgate is how the conspiracy is framed. It started off as a joke. A bunch of internet warrior conservatives kind of ran with it, and then the people got in trouble when they got all exposed because of internet hype and cancel culture and whatnot. When these liberals get fired from their positions, they're like, well, let's just do it for real. And then starts the game. And it's basically like 12 people. They're all set out to be hunted by these liberal elites. And they are progressively popped one by one and taken out until the end. And the best part I love about this movie is that we aren't 100% sure who our main character is right away. One of the things, this has nothing to do with nothing, but have you ever seen Squid Games?
I saw like the first half of it. Yeah. I saw the first half of the first season.
So I'm going to spoil it. Sorry. If you don't want me to say so, but it's been out for a while. It's been out for like 3 or 4 years. So, if you haven't watched Squid Games, the guy that you're following in the beginning is the guy who wins. Surprise, surprise. And that's one of the things that bothered me about Squid Games is I knew who was going to win because we're following the guy throughout the entire thing. We're following one person primarily. And that is what I loved about The Hunt, is that's not what we do. We meet the first character that we meet after the plane, which kind of works like a prologue. But once we're off the plane and we're on the field, the first character we meet is Emma Roberts' character. And we see Crystal, but she's just kind of over here and off to the side. And then we follow Emma Roberts and we meet the rest of the group, and then she dies right away. Now we're following the guy who was trying to help her, and then he eventually dies. And then we start following these other people. We find a group of people who are band together, and they get picked off, and then one of them dies. And then they go into this other, and this keeps happening until you're about 20, 25 minutes in. And then we focus on Crystal, and now we have our main character. And I feel like the movie is almost a movie of 2 parts. Everything before we really introduced Crystal, and then everything with Crystal after the fact.
Oh, it's totally killer. It's like a unreliable narrator appetizer. Like you get that, I'm always a fan of, you don't know who the hero is, and the one that you think is going to be the gunslinging superstar. Nope, this isn't going to, we're going to do this. We're going to take a left turn, and it's going to be unpredictable. I'm with you there, man. Like that.
Now, Sako, you were talking about, Carl was talking about the dialogue and the funny lines. First of all, this movie is hilarious. All of these actors play their funny roles by accident. You know how you got like a group of friends who are just funny? You know, got a bunch of people who are just funny by accident. These people are funny by accident. Crystal's a smart ass, but I wanted to know your thoughts, Sako, on the dialogue.
I thought it was legit the kind of stuff that I would discuss were I in situations like that. I thought the dialogue was very believable, and the voice wasn't the same for every character that we followed. It was a different voice for each narrator, and I really appreciated that. I think especially the dialogue from Gary.
Yeah.
Gary's dialogue was pretty great. Crisis actors.
I could see you saying. I could totally see you saying Crystal-esque lines, like when Gary is like, Jesus. It's like, no, Gary. It was not Gary. No, it's the other guy who says that, right? But it's Gary in the trunk.
Yeah, it's Gary.
Jesus Christ. He's like, no.
No, it's Gary.
That's Gary. That's what I love about Crystal is that first of all, let's talk about characters like Gary. So, in story, we start off with the text dialogue between the liberal elites. They're joking about the manor, right, and about the hunt. And then it's this text message that gets leaked that leads to everybody getting fired. We figure that out later on in the story. And it was in that termination of their jobs and losing their livelihoods. That's what makes them decide, well, screw it, we'll just do it for real. And then that leads into what we're seeing. And so the conspiracy of Manorgate has already been out and about. And these are people who have spoken out about Manorgate. And that's why they were chosen. And so when they get abducted, they instantly know, oh, you don't know what this is? This is Manorgate. This is exactly what this is. So, Carl, I wanted to know your thoughts on the idea that these characters wake up and automatically know what's happening, believable or not, given the context.
Yeah, given the context, well, number one, the kitsch factor a lot, dissuades me. Like, you're already because it's kind of campy and kitschy, and you have this kind of like elastic, narrative style where people like, the blood is spattering a little bit extra, so that they're not trying to be hyper realistic. So I don't worry about questioning like, whoa, is it believable that these conspiracy theorists would think that, I and not only that, but I don't think you have to go too far, at least in my experience, that a lot of folks who would be into this, if you were a person who is into this kind of conspiracy theory culture, then you might jump straight to that. I don't find that unbelievable at all. So between the kitschiness and the authentic representation of that internet culture, I think they're absolutely believable.
Sako?
No, I absolutely agree. I think due to internet culture and Reddit and all the names that were unsaid, dead sexy, like that's not her name, but like,
you know what? If she feels dead sexy inside, then we can call her dead sexy when we see all of her insides.
Yeah,
on all those spikes. It's fine.
Yeah.
It's fine. It's fine.
One of my favorite lines in the whole movie was when Betty Gilpin, Crystal, is in the gas station. She has annihilated the husband, and she's about to annihilate the wife. And she's like, cigarettes are only $6 in Arkansas. You done fucked up, bitch.
And like, I love how her
eyes
is like, you fucked up. And that's really the only time she seems that extreme of a character. And I think her character really tones down after that, because she's really quiet when we see her, and it really sets the tone. Because when we first see Crystal, she takes like her work pen, breaks the little metal piece off the back, gives it a little bit of static, a little bit of electric charge, puts it on a leaf in the little pond, and looks to see which way it turns to create like a makeshift
compass. Yeah,
and then she follows this way. Huh?
That's cool, man. That's a cool insight. That totally went by me.
Because she does
I saw that scene. I didn't know what she was doing.
She was creating a compass, and that was a hint of her survival/military background, which sets the tone in as we go through to the end, where Athena goes into her villain monologue and her passionate emotions about grilled cheese. And how she goes into this description of Crystal's character. And for me, I think we recognize in this moment that all the things that she describes about liberty for y'all, the screen name that she thinks Crystal goes by.
Oh, justice for y'all. Yeah.
Justice for y'all. So like nothing that has been demonstrated equals who she thinks Crystal is.
Right.
Like Crystal is clearly not this person that Liberty thinks she is, or Athena thinks she is. And it's like, so like there's a question at the end about whether or not this is the right person or not. And I was like, it kind of, for
No,
us,
you know,
the viewer, it's obvious.
that's a good point. The writing has fact checks. So despite the kitsch between the cigarette prices and the makeshift compass, there are fact checks where you create a little bit of that realism, so that it doesn't seem corny later when it comes out. She's military.
Military. Yeah.
Yeah. So all these little points are spread through, but the last part of this category is pacing. So my thoughts are, everything is kind of set through. Do you think it's set through in a way that keeps the a steady tone from beginning to end? Sako?
I think that it was done expertly, and just like, I mean, it goes all the way through the movie, like up to the end. And how do I put this? I am proud of my own pacing in my writing, so I'm particularly sensitive to it in movies and shows and stuff like that. So when I see a movie like The Hunt and it's action the whole fucking time, like I'm entertained.
Well, yeah, pacing is kind of everything. It's the airspeed. You lose altitude the second your pacing lags, and even in a constant action kind of movie, it can get dull if the action's too samey and you're not getting any character development. Maybe, a lot of the brilliance is the way that the economy of the great lines and those little examples, like the one Dwan was mentioning, with the leaf and the compass, that's character development in the midst of the action. So, I think that there are some it seems to me there are some echoes of Tarantino in this movie, and at his best. And then but I'm not a huge fan of him, and some of his movies I'm not crazy about. And this kind of the ones, that I'm not crazy about kind of weren't able to sustain that development in the action the way this movie does.
Tarantino's kind of like a beast of it into himself. People kind of love or hate Tarantino's. I tend to I trend to like Tarantino movies because
it depends.
Like how quirky. Actually, it's the fact that the pacing is almost intentionally thrown off in a Tarantino movie. Not to hang on that for too long, because we're going to move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
But there is something about intentionally breaking the pacing, kind of like in Pulp Fiction when they get to the door of that apartment where the three guys are, and you're like, okay, now it's time to open the door and go in, but they pause. Hold on. Not yet. And they go off to the side and just have another conversation and have one of those weird Tarantino off conversations. Yeah. I like that because it throws off what I'm expecting. But there is a point to, if you're expecting the movie to come on and keep going, sometimes Tarantino doesn't do it. And I think
I think for me it's also about, are you going to commit to the realism or the kitsch? Because if you have some realistic violence at one part and then you have some kitschy blood spurts, then it kind of breaks the shell of my willing suspension of disbelief. Whereas if you establish there's going to be some kitsch in this, it's going to be a little over the top, and you just run with it, then I'm kind of in there with you.
So Carl, what do you think? Star for this section?
Pacing?
For
writing,
dialogue,
as a whole.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Most definitely.
I give it a star for writing.
I do too. I mean, there's
so
no
that's
way.
There's
no way you can't.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so characterization, casting. So I thought. So it mostly follows Crystal, except for the girl in the beginning POV that was not her. We get a good handle on how she handles the world and how she was raised. So we get a little bit of backstory, which we'll get there when we get there. But I definitely think that hiding Athena until the end, like just showing the back of her head for the first half of the movie was pretty good, because she is inexplicably a total badass.
She's your final boss.
She's the final boss. Yeah.
Yeah, they qualify that with the consultant, the military consultant, quote unquote, trained her.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a little thinner than we had in the other character development facts.
Yeah, that was mentioned in the article that you had shared with us. Carl shared with us
that Vanity Fair magazine, right? Yeah,
Vanity Fair. It was a great article. It was a lot of great points. If you get a chance to look up that Vanity Fair article on the hunt, you can do that too after listening to us, because we're more important. But we talked about, we've discussed it already, the points of view and how we start off with the Emma Roberts character, but we're on the plane where we're kind of seeing things in the third person kind of way, and then we're following the blonde, and then we're following the group of three that make it to the gas station, and we follow them, and then once all of them die, it's like, who's next? And then they're like, well, Snowball is coming. And now in Snowball, that's the Animal Farm themed name that we get for Crystal. And we'll touch on to all the Animal Farm stuff when we go to like tone, mood, and backstory in the next section.
Mm-hmm.
But I love the fact that, as we discussed already, we changed points of view, we changed characters that we're following. It kind of keeps our perspective fresh. We're learning more about the setting through the characters versus like blatant exposition. It's more so like, oh yeah, I'm here, I'm from this guy, and I'm this kind of person. I have 7 guns, I know what I'm doing. All right, Can your finger do this? Can your finger do this? And squeeze the trigger. And
this. Yeah.
And I don't know who these people are. I love the fact that most of this cast is actors I'm unfamiliar with, because now I don't have expectations on them.
I knew Crystal, the actress who played Crystal, Betty Gilden, from Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling. Did either of you guys see that at all?
Oh,
she was the American.
Yeah.
She was like the Miss America, sort of all-American gal, like wrestler. And that she had there's some DNA from that character in Crystal, because it's like the kind of acerbic one-liners that, that she's dealing out. Like, are these, smart people pretending to be idiots, or idiots pretending to be smart, kind of stuff. Like, I could have, that sounded like a Glow line, from her character, like the one who's supposed to kind of look like a ditzy blonde, but really is like, super perspicacious, and sees everything. So cast well.
Yeah, and like we mentioned before, these people are hilarious. Between the writing and you can write a funny line, but the delivery of that punchline has to work. And Gary's line works, and Dawn is a great funny character.
Dawn, yeah. Mark Wahlberg, yeah.
And I love the were they in Croatia? Would they end up being in Croatia?
Yeah.
The Croatian guy, he's like, "Are you being hunted like Dawn?" He's like, "I don't know, who's Dawn? Bring in Dawn." And then Dawn's like, "See, I told you." And he's like, "Dawn." She's like, "Yeah. I didn't like Dawn." And the delivery by these characters of their lines, they embodied their characters. They embodied the elements of the stereotypical Southern conservative. And they did so. And this is really important to highlight for the sake of this movie and this conversation, that they did this in such a way that is not portraying them as positive or negative. Despite this movie coming out in 2019, the political space was stupid hot, almost as hot as it is now. And a lot of what held this movie back from being released when it was supposed to be was a lot of conservatives having an issue with the idea of conservatives being hunted. And personally, I don't see what the issue was. One, it's fiction, and two, they were the victims, and they become the victims.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised.
Really sure
I guess I shouldn't be surprised by anything. I'm a little surprised because the what do you call it? The humorous indictment of the liberal elites was also hilarious and kind of spot on too. And like that also cast well. Like I don't remember the name of the dude who plays the guy on the plane who's ordering. He wants his
Glenn
Mediterranean.
Howerton. Yeah.
Oh,
Richard.
dude, that guy is such a beautiful.
Richard.
Like he's like, you know, and the way they go at each other when they over their political correctness or lack thereof, when they're just like skewering each other and they can't even move forward on their own plan because they're busy like canceling each other. Like
the mom and pop. I mean, you could almost believe it was a real married couple that was just hired to be themselves, and that's what I loved about that casting, because they're like, oh yeah, the black people are like, hey, African Americans. Look, it's okay to say black now. It's like, says who? Says NPR, which is made up of almost entirely white people. And that weird liberal stuff. Like, listen, for the people at home, I don't care how you believe or view the world. This shit's funny.
Right.
If you're a conservative, you laugh at liberals, this is the movie for you. If you're a liberal and laugh at conservatives, this is the movie for you. If you don't have a stick stuck up your ass, if you don't have a stick stuck up on your ass,
climate change is real.
You can just laugh at humor because it's funny, then absolutely watch this movie. I prefer you take the stick out of your ass first, because this is just a funny movie, no matter where you sit on this side of the fence or that side of the fence. Just take the fence pole out of your ass and watch the movie. Enjoy the ride. Now that I've got off my soapbox.
Cut right through that Gordian knot. They were like, you know what? We're not going to worry about it. We're going to hit everybody. You know,
yeah, and that's the best thing, man.
Yeah.
And everybody can get it. These jokes were rated E for everyone. It was fantastic. And I loved it. How many more cliches can I throw into this section? Sako, thoughts?
So evolution, I would say consistency, really, because the evolution was just us learning new shit about the narrator. And I thought it was like with the pacing and in the writing, like they just like kind of sprinkled the breadcrumbs and revealed little things to us, like breadcrumb at a time, which I thought was really interesting. The twist for Crystal was my favorite. Like the fact that she wasn't the justice for y'all, like, yes.
It showed how much the liberal elites were just so desperate to exact their unnecessary revenge. They were so their feelings were they were all snowflakey, for you start using those kind of terms. They were such snowflakes in that moment that that they're just like, well, we're just going to pick her up and we're going to pick them up and we're just going to grab all these people and do this thing, and we're going to be mean because they're booty heads and they said mean things about us.
Well, yeah, it was total irony. Like, let's find an enemy, not unlike the kind of stuff they indict, you know, the conservative dudes about. Like, you know, we're going to hunt these people down, but then they were like, you know, okay, we're going to hunt these people down, but we're not going to worry. You know, we need that enemy to exist. So this is who's going to be it, whether it's accurate or not. You know, so none of their posturing was going to hide the fact that they were you know, absolutely, you know, thralls of their own prejudice.
Yeah. Excellently spoken. So, Carl, your thoughts on the third star? Yay or nay?
Yay. Star, man, for sure.
Sako.
Yeah, agreed. Third star. Mm-hmm.
I couldn't help but agree. Again, Gilpin was magic. Swank was magic, and the other cast of unfamiliar
except for Wahlberg. Like I was.
Well, there's a few. If I remember who all plays what, like there's a few in there. If I sat and thought about it, because we know Emma Roberts and such. I'm a big Scream fan, so of course, miss Scream 4. But it's so well done, and I kind of want to see anything done by any of them in hopes that it's themed to be somewhere close as comical as this is.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, man.
Category 4.
All right, category 4, the theme. So, is there a message? What was the tone? Was there a backstory? The message that I got out of it. So, I have a government name that is not the name that I go by. And there are dozens of people in my town that share my name. And the moral of the story for me was check your resources. Like check your facts, because that was an easy mistake. The difference between a Y and an E was the only mistake she made, and it was fatal.
Yeah.
And I loved it.
I would agree that I feel like this movie is set up and written so well that you could draw so many different messages from it. But when you look at the plot in its bare bones, you're looking at something that was joked about and was fake. And people just saw this thing that didn't exist, that these people did, and they made it real. And they made it so real that these people were punished for it in real life over non-existent such and such. And they were so hurt by the non-existent such and such and how real these people thought it was. You guys can't see my hands. That the fake thing became a real thing. It's like none of this existed in the front. Like when you're looking at the backstory of this whole movie, this fake thing that that a bunch of goofy friends made up became viewed as real. So it was real in public opinion and public view. And then just it had real life consequences when they lost their jobs. And those real life consequences of them losing their jobs created this vengeful Manorgate becoming from just talk to reality. It would be the equivalent of if all of a sudden some small government said, hey, you know those Purge movies? Maybe, you know what? I'll tell this real story real quick. One of the Purge movies came out and there was an online joke. Some kid at a local high school here in Louisville made an online joke that they were going to do a real life Louisville Purge. They gave us they gave a date and a time, and they wanted to do a real life Louisville Purge. Now, the kid was joking, right? Obviously, dumb kid just saying something online, right? And then he says something, and other people start picking it up, and they're like, hey, that'd be really funny. Like if we just do like a real Louisville Purge and we just start at a certain time on a certain day, we just go around and just doing breaking rules, breaking crimes, and committing crimes. And then it got to the point where this joke became viewed as something real. And then the police had to get involved. They're like, hey, no, we're not doing a real life Louisville Purge. But I bet you I downloaded a police scanner app that day and I stayed home that night because there were people who actually went out and started vandalizing. No one got like murdered or anything like that. Everything stayed pretty calm on that level, but there was real life instances of burglary and vandalism and things of that nature, all because some kid made a joke. And this movie, The Hunt, almost follows that example to the T. And that boils down to the theme and message that I was basically covered the backstory. It goes to the message that I got from it was watch your words, because there is power in your words. And what's a joke to you can become reality to somebody else. It can easily become reality. You can manifest something with your words that easily. And it's more of a warning of that kind of thing. Because again, that literally happened here in Louisville, Kentucky. It was called the Louisville Purge, and some rando kid at my old high school. He started it. Like, not a guy I went to high school with, but this kid went to the same high school I had graduated from. So it was a real thing.
I think that's well said, Dwan. And I think you're right. Like, I think that being a little more specific, I think it's an indictment of the way the internet causes us to not question our assumptions. It's sort of like the questioning of assumptions inhibitor or something, like, 'cause it's like we can go down our own rabbit holes and have our assumptions reinforced by the people who are like us. And it works in all directions. Like in this movie, showing that it happened with the conservative culture and with the liberal culture, and so it's like kind of like the way the information technology causes a kind of collective insanity, but among these different siloed groups. So and I think that what's cool about The Hunt is that it's able to do it with, we were talking on the other show about, I was talking about when a political allegory is too obvious, it's not as good. But I think because of its awesome sense of humor in this movie, because it's so funny and it's kind of kitschy and campy, that it's able to get away with this like political allegory of a sensitive topic of the different political subcultures online, and it's able to be critical of these cultures without and remain effective without. I mean, I guess it irritated some people, but generally speaking, I think it was able to take on that difficult subject, like you said, and admonish us about our words and about the way we use the technology, without coming across as like preachy or something like that, because it kept its sense of humor.
I think one of the things in that Vanity Fair article that you shared with us prior to this recording, the writer of that article made a very good point that they worked really, really hard to make Crystal likable, skilled, and essentially politically neutral. Because once you establish that she's not justice for y'all, she's no longer on this one side, and she obviously fought this side. So she doesn't have a side. She's the most neutral party in this whole thing. And I think with her victory at the end, it highlights like, hey, these people are extremely on the left and these people are extremely on the right. And they're both going to become victims of their own madness. And it's the person that sits kind of in the middle that walks away from this, her being apolitical and basically non-affiliated with either side kind of does that highlight. It's like, hey, you want to fall on either extremes. These are the types of metaphorical dangers that you're approaching. Like, again, it's be cautious.
I thought it was great because she was native to Arkansas. And she had the accent and everything like that, so she blended in with the conservatives really easy because, Bible Belt. But I felt like they really
Well, they're like the Bible Belt element, and also like the redneck jokes that kind of like having grown up in rural Maine and been around like the hunting culture and so forth, and that they were able to ham that up in a way that was kind of like enjoyable and yet still insightful. But one thing that's interesting about that you guys just reminded me about Crystal is that it's true. The film was pretty even-handed in like we're gonna make fun of both sides of the political culture. But one thing it seemed to consistently indict was the upper class culture, like the class. It was doing something with class and with the Orwell themes, like because in the end when Crystal is offering champagne to the flight attendant, saying, look, you should have some of this caviar and champagne to the flight attendant. There was definitely a feeling like, whatever the ups and downs about the different political cultures are, it was going somewhere with like the snowball references, the idealist in Animal Farm, the pig that tried to make the uprising at the farm actually equitable and trying to raise up the flight attendant so that, you know, it's not just this one a-hole who sits there and gets to have the good food on the plane. She gets on and immediately is like, look, you know, if it were up to me, you'd get to have some caviar and some champagne.
Yeah, and she actually shares it with the flight attendant, who was absolutely curious and you know, like definitely not of that culture.
Yeah.
And she's like, hey, eat all the caviar you want. Also, and the girl is like, so how is the booze? And she's like, it's wonderful.
And that's I think that's one of the caps of this movie, is that, again, it reflects on, like you mentioned, like the people on the extreme left politically, the extreme right politically. It does touch on classism, upper class versus the working class, because it was working class people fighting against the setup. You know, they're being set up by these corporate rich elites, and I think that's where you see this kind of a here and here kind of thing, this north, south, east, west kind of framing, where it's left versus right and up versus down. And then in the middle is Crystal. And this is where
to the extent it, it was sarcastic all the way through, but to the extent it got a little bit serious at the end, it seemed like it lay the blame at the feet of, you know, the working class folks were making their assumptions online, and that was totally dangerous. But I feel like it laid more responsibility at the feet of the folks with the money and the resources, saying, hey, you guys are the ones who decided, you know, you made a decision, you made an assumption, you made a decision to take the conspiracy and make it real. And you did it to defend your position and keep yourself where you were, and you made the assumption about the identities of the people with like Sako was saying, the people with the nicknames online, and those assumptions are you know what got everybody killed and are also going to make you lose because you made the assumption about Crystal, you know, like, who's probably called Crystal because she sees crystal clear.
Dun, dun, dun.
I mean, I hadn't thought about that, but that makes perfect sense to me.
I don't know. It's on the dark.
Hey, you know what? I'll take it.
So, backstory. I feel like the tortoise and the hare, or the box turtle and the jackrabbit, kind of sets the tone and the backstory for the final fight, you know. And then she sees the jackrabbit.
Yeah.
He's like, well, I don't want to be bludgeoned to death, so I'm gonna get up and so a little bit of backstory with the box turtle and the jackrabbit, and then like the third person 1% kind of like gave us the whole story, you know. So I'm sorry, you're okay.
Well, who was it? Which was it? Gary? Who was it that it was Gary she was telling the jackrabbit story to?
Mm-hmm.
Who did and so he was like, so who's the jackrabbit, right? So we're kind of waiting.
Telling Dawn after they found
Dawn.
Gary.
She was telling Dawn. She was telling Dawn the jackrabbit story. So then, so he asks who's the jackrabbit. So it's kind of like we're waiting to find out who's the jackrabbit, I guess, right? From that point on.
Yeah. So as far as tone and mood, I felt like it was tense, but the humor kind of like made it less tense.
Yeah, there was some levity that it brought. It was one of those things where, for example, at the gas station when the drone comes and is surveying, and guess when we introduced Gary and Gary shoots down the drone, you see this as a very serious moment because she's close to getting caught, and then it's one of those things like, yeah, well, I shot down the drone. That's a good thing. Of course it is. It's like, no, because it's like, well, they can't see us. It's like, well, you shot down the drone. They know you're here.
Yeah, she was right.
And she was able to use this kind of humor, kind of a smart assy tone and that sarcasm that is able to take a serious moment here. It's like, okay, cool. She was kind of like Wade here in that space.
Totally right to tell him he was a fool for shooting down the drone, but I still think it would be hard to not shoot down the drone. Would you have shot? I might have had to shoot the drone. I don't know. The drone,
right? It's kind of like. But of course, that goes back to the writing and how obviously that's what they do with the writing. It's like, hey, this is what a person would do in this situation. He see a drone spying on them, he's going to shoot it down. Yeah. That's why they had Gary do it. But then you had the character of Crystal, which doesn't follow any kind of rhyme or reason of anything else is going on, and she goes to explaining why we're going to do this and why we're going to do that. And I think it goes back into that, what we always talk about in writing, show, don't tell. And we get to show these character traits of Crystal that are all going to culminate in the final conversation with Athena. Like, when Athena starts going into it about the Crystal, like justice for y'all, she talks about justice for y'all, and we're looking back at the whole movie we just watched and like, this is not Crystal. You're clearly wrong, and there's no question about it. Like, you're obviously mistaken. And this is where we show, don't tell. All these character backgrounds for Crystal primarily. It was in moments like that.
Well, and also the technical side, which you had so brilliantly seen before, talking about the compass. Do you guys know? Did you guys catch, like, how was she listening in on? Maybe I just missed it. How was she listening in? Because when the drone appeared, she was listening to their radio, right?
She stole a radio from Mom and Pop.
She stole the radio from Mom and Pop. Okay,
yeah,
right. Yeah.
So they had a radio, so she was listening to the radio from Mom and Pop.
All right, she's on. They had the channel already on. She knows the channel because they had the channel. Okay, yeah.
Right.
So, do you think that Dawn was a traitor? Was Dawn blue or red?
I mean, if I had to pick, he was probably with the group because he was there at the beginning. He was the guy, I think, that was like, "Hey, can you do this?" So I don't think he was infiltrated, put in that deep, because I don't think that was. I feel like he would have had one more scene. If we had just met Dawn in that one scene, then maybe. But mind you, they weren't supposed to be there in the first place. That whole scene was an accident. Like, hey, that train was not supposed to be stopped. So none of this is part of the game. So let's get out of this, and then I'll let you guys go for a little while. I'll give you guys a head start. I think Dawn was actually part of that conservative group, but I think ultimately it's left open-ended because it didn't matter. I think it just didn't matter because in the end, when you look at both sides, that were playing, the only person that existed on either side, the liberal side or the conservative side, was the only person left was Crystal.
So you're saying that Hillary Swank was setting him up when she was talking to him on the radio, pretending that she knew him?
Yes, because I think she was trying to set up distrust because she's watching Crystal and she sees Crystal is obviously skilled. She's obviously made her way that far. So I think by creating doubt in Crystal was the goal. Right. Okay. That tracks. Because otherwise it would be two people coming up to the manor versus one. Right. Yeah, that's cool.
All right. So 4th star?
Absolutely.
Another 4 star.
Yeah, this movie, of course, it's kind of aces, right? I agree. It's got to give it the star. Come on, this is the smart one.
That's 4 stars total for The Hunt. I didn't catch who wrote it. I know it was written by 2 people. And
I forget.
Didn't catch who directed it.
It was 2 dudes I haven't heard of, but that's not saying much because I pay attention to novels more than screenwriters, alas.
Yeah, me
Yeah.
too.
Some screenwriter enthusiasts out there is like, "What, are you crazy?" But yeah, I hadn't heard of them when I read them yet.
Okay. I guess if you like this video, then you should hit the like button. Last week we did Mousetrap. We tore that apart. And next week we're gonna tear into Haunt with an A.
With an A.
Haunt with an A. And you might want to subscribe and maybe even ring the bell on the off chance that YouTube actually notifies you when we go live. And we will catch you guys on the other side.
Thanks for having me. Guys are awesome. Rock on.